Lila Stevens, possessor of shimmering eyes like evening stars and a hypnotizing smile that illuminated even the darkest of nights, personified an unrestrained and wild force of nature. Her charm, a potent blend of magnetic charisma and breathtaking beauty, had the power to bend the strongest wills to her favor. But this extraordinary ability did not sprout overnight. It was the product of an inheritance forged in the fires of a traumatic past and a childhood sprinkled with unimaginable bitterness. Born and raised in the midst of a crumbling family, Lila learned from a young age to navigate life's storms alone. Her mother, a woman whose heart was lost in the mazes of chemical dependency, could barely carry the burden of her own existence, while her father, an abusive and absent specter, was a ghostly figure in the tapestry of her life. Hunger was a frequent companion in her days, and the notion of home, for her, was a distant caricature of what a safe haven should be. To withstand the brutal hostility of existence, Lila honed an arsenal of persuasion and manipulation skills. She acquired the gift of deciphering people, as if reading an open book, understanding their vulnerabilities and using them to her advantage. Over time, she realized that men, particularly older and prosperous ones, were surprisingly vulnerable to her seductive aura and dazzling beauty. And so, she began to refine her art of scamming, like a dancer honing her movements. For years, Lila had been weaving a web of seduction around older, prosperous men, enchanting them with her radiant charm and meticulous attention. She became a virtuoso in the art of manipulation, evaporating with the fortunes of her prey before they even had a chance to realize the trap they had fallen into. What had begun as a desperate resource for survival had transmuted into her way of life, and Lila never took a single step back, leaving in her wake a long sequence of broken hearts and emptied bank accounts. Lila Stevens had already set her sights on her new prize, Russell Stewart. The embodiment of an iconic real estate tycoon in New York City, Russell exuded power and influence in an almost palpable way. Even at the brink of 70, an intense glow of youth still danced in his deep blue eyes, while his silver locks added an aura of wisdom and distinction. Russell Stewart was not merely a man with colossal wealth, he was a colossus within the real estate industry, with his towering skyscrapers dominating the city skyline like steel and glass giants. His wealth was immeasurable, his name known on every street corner of the metropolis and even in remote regions. He was renowned for both his business acumen and boundless generosity, sponsoring a myriad of charities and community events. Having been widowed for 15 years and not remarried since, with no children to inherit his fortune, Russell was the perfect target for Lila. Lila Stevens, a shrewd and skillful woman, moved with the grace of a feline as she chose Russell Stewart as her next prey. She infiltrated his life with an almost imperceptible subtlety, a serpent silently slithering through the grass. Their first encounter, meticulously orchestrated by Lila, was presented to Russell as a charming coincidence. The stage for this casual encounter was an art exhibition at one of New York's most prestigious museums. Lila, elegantly dressed, feigned interest in the displayed artworks, patiently waiting for the right moment to set her trap. When Russell finally made his appearance, she approached him with the curiosity of a student, asking questions about an abstract and complex painting. Russell, with his rich palette of knowledge and passion for art, couldn't resist the opportunity to share. Lila drank in his words attentively, her incandescent eyes gleaming with apparent admiration. She positioned herself as a naive young woman, fascinated by the magnitude of the city and completely enchanted by Russell's wisdom. To him, the ethereal beauty seemed like a refreshing breeze, blowing away the dust of superficiality from his social routine. Lila persisted in crossing paths with Russell at various social events, each time with a captivating question or an incisive observation on the tip of her tongue, enough to hold his attention. With each new encounter, she unfolded as a more captivating companion, appearing genuinely interested in his universe of experiences and adventures. Her smile was like a breath of sweetness, and her veil of innocence was skillfully drawn, leading Russell to believe that she was a young woman completely fascinated by the rich tapestry of his life. He found himself gradually drawn to her, not just because of her physical charm, but also because of the vulnerability she displayed and the admiration she expressed for him. In this way, Lila Stevens entered Russell Stewart's life, advancing one step at a time, so delicately that he barely noticed how he had become dependently attached to her, her presence, and affection. Lila's cunning had firmly planted her in Russell's heart, precisely where she desired to be. Slowly and methodically, Lila began to weave a web of affection and dependency around Russell, seizing every opportunity to become an indispensable piece in the machinery of his life. She flattered him, listened to him with unwavering attention, and showed a care that seemed so authentic that Russell, despite his experience and discernment, began to believe that she truly loved him. In reality, Russell Stewart was now completely entangled, with no inkling that he was just the latest name on an extensive list of wealthy men that Lila Stevens had bewitched with her beauty and charm, only to vanish with their riches, leaving behind nothing but financial and emotional emptiness. Russell Stewart, a man known for his keen discernment and incredibly astute ability to read people, seemed to have his faculties compromised when it came to Lila Stevens. He was enveloped in a dense cloud of passion that seemed to overshadow his usual judgment. Lila, with her carefully staged affection and compassion, managed to capture Russell's heart in a way that no one else had. He found himself trapped in her web of enchantment, accepting without question the image of purity and love that she skillfully projected. There were moments of quietude between them, when Lila, with a gaze that seemed to overflow with affection, whispered in his ear, "I love you, Russell." And Russell, looking deeply into those bright and seemingly affectionate eyes, believed without reservation. They united their lives in an opulent ceremony that became the most talked-about event of the year. The elite of New York gathered to witness the union of the prominent real estate mogul with the beautiful young woman who had inexplicably captured his heart. Lila, dressed in white with a veil covering her radiant face, walked majestically down the aisle, her gaze fixed and unwavering on Russell. To the guests watching, they appeared to be the perfect example of a deeply in love couple. At the reception that followed, during their first dance as husband and wife, Russell whispered in Lila's ear, "I never imagined I would find someone like you, Lila. You have brought a light to my life that I didn't even know was missing." And Lila, with her perfect mastery of the art of acting, responded with a gentle smile, "And you, Russell, have brought love into my life." To the outside world, Lila seemed to be the most devoted and loving wife. Her plan was unfolding exceptionally well, and she was closer than ever to achieving her ultimate goal. What no one could see was that behind the mask of love and devotion, Lila was meticulously orchestrating her boldest and most decisive move. Fate, with its relentless nature, decided to drastically change the course of history just a few months after Lila and Russell's union. Russell Stewart, the real estate icon of New York, the man who dreamed and brought to life many of the towering skyscrapers that majestically stood against the city's skyline, was unexpectedly claimed by the merciless harbinger of death. His heart, which had pulsated with unwavering energy for so many years, was abruptly silenced without warning. The news shook the entire metropolis, a shockwave that reverberated through every corner of every skyscraper. The giant who had shaped the city's landscape was no more, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill. Lila, with the talent of a natural actress, slipped into the role of the grieving widow with an authenticity that was almost unsettling. Her eyes, once sparkling with indomitable brightness, were now clouded with tears. Her voice, once lively and full of joy, became a stifled murmur of anguish. She immersed herself in mourning, a cloak of black that seemed to suck all the light around her, accepting condolences from Russell's friends and acquaintances with apparent sorrow. During the funeral ceremony, Lila stood by the casket, a black veil hiding her face as silent tears streamed down her cheeks. "He was the love of my life," she whispered to those who approached to offer their condolences, her voice trembling with tangible sadness. "Russell was, He meant everything to me, she confessed to a friend, her words broken by sobs. I just don't know how I'll go on without him. But deep inside Lila, a heart hardened by years of cold calculation beat with an almost joyful rhythm. Russell was dead, and she, the sole heir to his incalculable fortune. All she needed to do was continue playing the role of the grieving widow for a little longer, and Russell's wealth would unquestionably be hers. With each word of condolences, each sympathetic glance, Lila experienced a whirlwind of contrasting emotions. Relief, for her plan unfolding so perfectly, anticipation, for the promise of what was to come. The biggest coup of her life was on the verge of completion, and all she had to do was wait patiently. The arrival of the crucial day, the day of the will reading, finally came. In a severely austere conference room within Russell's prestigious lawyer's office, Lila sat alone, impeccably dressed in mourning attire, perfectly embodying the image of the grieving widow. Her delicate, slender fingers fidgeted with a white linen handkerchief, a subtle sign of her hidden anxiety and the growing anticipation within her. Russell's lawyer, the esteemed Mr. Pierce, a silver-haired man of age with a sober gaze behind his thin reading glasses, entered the room holding a sealed envelope in his hands. The already heavy silence in the room intensified, all eyes fixated on that sealed envelope containing Russell's final wish. "Let's begin," declared Mr. Pierce, his voice reverberating against the walls of the room. He opened the envelope with an almost religious care, and then began reciting its contents to those present. With each word uttered by Mr. Pierce, the mask of calm on Lila's face began to unravel, slowly replaced by an expression of horror and disbelief that grew. Russell, with posthumous generosity, had distributed his colossal fortune to a series of charitable institutions. Hospitals, schools, medical research foundations, animal shelters, the list seemed endless. When the lawyer finally reached the part of the will intended for Lila, the room fell into a silence so dense it felt almost tangible. "To my beloved wife, Lila," Mr. Pierce began, looking at Lila through his golden-rimmed glasses. "I bequeath the small house in the quiet town of Evergreen, a hidden paradise nestled among green hills and flower-filled fields." Lila felt as if the ground was shifting beneath her feet. This couldn't be happening. All her meticulous planning, all her maneuvers and manipulations, for a house in a forgotten little town in the middle of nowhere. But there was more. Mr. Pierce continued reading, his voice becoming softer, almost tender. "And to Lila, I also leave these words. I have loved you, my dear, from the moment I laid eyes on you. But I also sensed the shadow in your eyes, the emptiness in your heart. I knew of your plan, I investigated your entire past, yet I still chose to believe in the possibility of true love. I hope this house, away from the glitz and glamour, teaches you the value of a simple and honest life." Silence filled the room. Russell's last words, so laden with love and sadness, hung in the air. Lila was in shock. Russell knew. He knew everything and yet still loved her. And in his final act, he tried to show her the true essence of life, something that money couldn't buy. The stillness that filled the room was almost deafening. This must be some mistake," Lila finally managed to whisper, her voice weak and barely audible. "There must be some kind of misunderstanding." Mr. Pierce, despite the evident surprise in his own eyes, maintained his composure. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Stewart, but this is your late husband's valid final will." What was supposed to be the culmination of her masterstroke had turned into her worst nightmare. Lila had been left with almost nothing, while Russell's fortune had been directed towards the greater good. The true character of Russell, the man she thought she had deceived, had finally been revealed, leaving her with nothing but a house in an unknown town and a harsh lesson that would never be forgotten. Lila was in deep shock. Russell's revelation left her with a bitter taste of betrayal and scorn. She could hardly believe that he had unraveled her intentions from the very beginning. It was as if he was laughing at her naivety from beyond the grave, imparting a final lesson upon her that she never intended to learn. The brutal reality of her situation began to seep into every pore of her being. She, the master of complex schemes, had been deceived. Russell, the man she believed she had fooled, had given her a final lesson in humility and authenticity. Her face faded into a ghostly pallor as she realized that he had turned the tables against her, leaving her with nothing more than a modest house in a town forgotten by God and the world. In a mix of indignation and humiliation, Lila found herself cornered, with no other options. Russell's opulent mansion, his sophisticated cars, his priceless jewelry, everything was abruptly stripped away from her. Her only inheritance was a small house in Evergreen, a town she had never heard of until that fateful day. With no alternatives and no means, Lila packed her bags and moved to Evergreen. The bright lights of the metropolis were replaced by undulating green fields and mesmerizing blue skies, a world so detached from her usual reality that it seemed almost otherworldly. Her heart burned with so much anger that she intended to sell the house and plot her next move, but for now, she would have to settle into the house until her plan was complete. As she adjusted to the modest house that was now her sole possession, Lila couldn't ignore the palpable irony of the situation. The manipulator, who always had everything under control, ended up being manipulated in the end. And as she watched the golden sunset descend upon the hills of Evergreen, she wondered if Russell's final lesson could somehow transform her. The town, with its quiet streets, charming houses, and welcoming neighbors, was a drastic contrast to the luxurious and opulent world Lila was accustomed to inhabiting. In the house, she found an additional letter from Russell, addressed to her. Within the meticulously written letter, Russell's admission was clear: he was aware of Lila's true intentions from the start. His elegant penmanship depicted his knowledge of her dark past, the schemes and manipulations that had paved her path up until that point. However, despite it all, his message was unequivocal: he genuinely loved her. "I believe in you, Lila," he wrote, the words dripping with sincerity and faith. "I believe in your ability to change, to build a new life here in Evergreen." The letter continued with affectionate details about the house where he had spent his childhood, a place that had shaped him and instilled the values that turned him into the respectable and successful man he was. Hope simmered in his words, the hope that Lila could follow a similar path and find the tranquility he had known there. "The house," he explained, "is a safe haven, a place to escape the temptations and pitfalls of a life driven by greed and selfishness." His desire was for her to learn from his experience, to find a new direction, and perhaps even redemption. Russell's words flowed like a balm, an elixir of love and hope that touched Lila's hardened heart in a way she never imagined possible. He had faith in her, even when she had deprived herself of it. And as her eyes scanned those words, something inside her began to change, to metamorphose. Lila, for the first time in her existence, began to deeply reflect on the choices she had made, on the winding path she had traversed. The house in Evergreen, Russell's legacy, now seemed less like a punishment and more like an opportunity, a chance to start afresh and shape a purposeful life. She realized that Russell could have easily exposed her, but chose to give her a chance at transformation. Lila remained in a state of shock, reality unfolding before her like a richly detailed tapestry. Her initial impulse was anger, a burning fury against Russell. How dare he manipulate her life even after his death? However, that surge of anger soon gave way to quiet introspection. Gradually, Lila began to connect with the people of Evergreen, reaching out to help her neighbors with small tasks, participating in community events and local festivities. For the first time in her life, Lila felt a sense of belonging, that she was an integral part of a community that accepted her as she was. "Mrs. Rodriguez, let me help you with these groceries," Lila offered, seeing her elderly neighbor struggling with heavy bags. "It's truly my pleasure." Eventually, on a gray, rainy afternoon, Lila stumbled upon an old, dusty box in the attic. The box was filled with letters, each meticulously handwritten by Russell. The letters were addressed to his first wife, Stella. Russell's words were brushed with love, regret, and the need to do good as a means of making amends for past mistakes. "My love," he had written in one of them, "there is not a single day that goes by without me lamenting my mistakes. But every mistake is an opportunity to learn, to grow. We must practice goodness, not to erase our mistakes, but to learn from them." The true inheritance that Russell had left for Lila was not the modest house in Evergreen, but the chance to redefine her path. The chance to learn from her mistakes, to redeem herself, and emerge as a better person. With this understanding, Lila decided to put down roots in Evergreen. She became a vital piece of the community, known for her generosity and willingness to help. Her past of manipulation and deceit was replaced by a present of authenticity and benevolence as she chose to live the life Russell had envisioned for her. A life of love, understanding, and above all, personal growth. Throughout time, Lila's transformation was as gradual as it was profound. She discovered the invaluable worth of honesty, community, and generosity, virtues that overflowed in Russell but that she had previously neglected. She found a sense of fulfillment and purpose in her life, a void she didn't even know needed filling. The most remarkable milestone of this change came when Lila decided to use the modest savings she had accumulated to open a small library in town, dedicated to the memory of Russell. The building became a pillar in the community, a warm and welcoming gathering place. The joy Lila found in seeing the bright smiles on children's faces as they discovered the pleasure of reading was unmatched. In the end, the inheritance Russell left for Lila was infinitely more precious than any monetary sum she could have expected. It was a gift that led her to confront herself, to examine her past in a new light, and to grow from it. And throughout this process, she discovered a peace and purpose she had no idea were missing. Lila finally understood that Russell's love for her was genuine. He wished for her to find redemption and happiness, and that was exactly what she found in Evergreen. And so, dear viewers, we conclude a truly extraordinary narrative. A story filled with manipulation, betrayal, and ultimately, redemption. Lila, the woman who spent a lifetime deceiving others, finally found truth in a quiet corner of the world called Evergreen. The inheritance left by Russell Stewart to Lila consisted not of tangible wealth but of the invaluable opportunity to change, evolve, and become a better version of herself. Lila's saga is a poignant reminder that we all have the capacity to redirect our paths, no matter how winding they may have been. We hope you have relished this touching and inspiring narrative. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories like this one. We would love to hear your thoughts on this narrative, so please share your comments below. And remember, no matter how challenging life may seem, there is always room for change and evolution. Just like Lila, we all have the potential to find our own evergreen. So, until our next encounter, keep dreaming, keep growing, and keep being inspired by the stories we share with you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.